Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Scholars from the Edge of Time, we'll be exploring the mythical monster, King Kong. Greetings and welcome, Mr. Dyack and Miss Brittany. How are you?
Greetings, Hercules. Doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm also doing well. A book that I contributed to on alien artifacts just came out. So I'm pretty happy about that. They liked the way I wrote the chapter. So I'm going to write a serialized set of metaphysical adventures for a series of books they're doing. So I'm pretty happy about that. And for my bigger book, that's still, we haven't gotten the contracts yet. And I just got back the feedback on editing it. So I'm starting to think about how I want to edit it with their suggestions. And then I was told to prepare for other people's suggestions as well. So that's going to go on for quite a while, but I'm very excited. What new projects are you guys working on? Because you guys are always working on new and exciting things.
Well, I'm in the same boat as you on editing stuff. I just got my how do I put, oh man, I don't know why I'm slipping about this. Usually before a book comes out, you get a proof back and you go through and do your final edits. And the Twilight Zone book I'm in, I just got the proof of that last week. So I got to go through my essay on that movie Encounter of the Unknown, just correct some, grammatical errors, comma here, I italicize that. So that's on track to actually be published in October. So, I mean, that book's been 2.5 years in the making.
Wow.
I think it started right at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was nice to get that proof and excited for that. And then I got a note from my editor on the Gladiator book that the final manuscript has been sent off to the publisher. That one I've been waiting even longer on. And so that's exciting to hopefully I'll see the cover art for that one soon. So same boat as you, the final edits, getting all the last minute input and corrections and stuff in. So excited.
How about you, Michelle?
For me, I actually just got news this week, an essay that I have on Bernie Wrightson and his illustrations that he did for Frankenstein. That book, A Vindication of Monsters, edited by Claire Fitzgerald. I think it's Fitzgerald.
We'll go with that.
Yes, we'll go with that, but I may be slightly off on her last name. We had gone through an edit process, and then she got she's going to self-publish, and now she has a publisher, the IFWG. They're out of Australia or New Zealand, I believe. And anyway, they're going to be publishing the book. So it's called A Vindication of Monsters, and that'll be out in September of 2023.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so very excited about that. In the meantime, I continue to have an open call for Highlander essays. So I have that over at my website. And then I've got an essay that I'm working on for a collection called Cats.
A companion.
So I'm writing an essay on the cat in The Mummy, the 1999 version, and making comparisons to Egyptian mythology on cats.
And I'll be doing an essay for that book too. I'll be looking at portrayals of cats in peplum films. So you've got, cats in the arena where they fight them, or cats in the political, sphere where they're tiny, they're all over. So that'll be a interesting paper to write too. So I don't think we've ever shared a TOC together where we've both done essays.
I think that'll be a first. Yes.
First, yeah. So that's, unfortunately that's on since that one is so far in the future, so we're kind of taking our time writing that essay.
Yeah, I actually think they're not due until March of next year. So, and they're small ones. They're about 3,500 words. So it's kind of a small essay. And we have a cat named Max, so we might hear him once in a while. He gets a little wants to be friends with other kitties in another room. The last thing is I actually submitted a abstract to another collection called Undead Superheroes, and I'm excited about that one because I'm hoping to write about The Living Mummy, and that is the Marvel series that was done back in about the mid 70s, I believe. And it started with issue number 5, supernatural thrillers. And so it's about in Cantu, the living mummy. And so I think there's like about 10 issues. And so I talk about the original series with him in it, and how he is kind of a anti superhero, and kind of his emergence as a hero.
Thank you for sharing your journey with that on an earlier show or two. I used to read those comics when they first came out. I used to read that, Werewolf by Night, The Frankenstein Monster, The Tomb of Dracula. So it was a very welcome, nostalgic walk for me when you shared what you were finding.
Oh yeah, and I just finished my collection. I was able to secure issue 11 and issue 13, so now I'll be able to read through the entire series and start developing my essay from that.
Very exciting stuff.
I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
I keep looking that way because we got a cat that's about to make a move on a fan. So if you
If
see
you
me
hear
jump
it
off
crash,
camera,
It's only to correct a problem with one of our kitties. So
and I think the last thing I have is I just did a book review on the Sylvia Christel book that was just released by Cult Epics a couple months ago. And she was an actress that was in the Emmanuel films and a whole bunch of other, well, she was going to act in King Kong, which is one of our topic tonight, but she said no to that deal. So her career trajectory took a radical departure there. But so that's up. So I continue to do, I don't know, an essay or a book review or something every 2 weeks at my website, just to keep, you know, output going as we work on our big projects and our podcasts and stuff. So
And thank you for sharing those, both of you. Thank you for sharing your postings in the Sword and Sandal Cinema group. It really means a lot to me and to the community.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, anytime we get any new sword and sandal loot, we gotta share it off. I mean, I think I just got what, Samson and the 7 Miracles of the World, and Sedan and some others. So it's not, there's a nice little, you know, I don't want to say renaissance. It's still kind of, you know, low key, but it's nice seeing some older sword and sandal fare getting some Blu-ray releases now instead of those blurry alpha video versions.
well, and I think you know the boutique releases are very helpful, because they obviously are passionate about the particular movies that they're releasing, and so they do a lot more effort, which is nice for those of us that are studying those films.
And fingers crossed, any boutique publishers, if you need a commentary track from either of us, you know how to reach us.
And Hercules as well. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate being included. That would be extremely cool. I'm going to be doing a show on the Kings of Strength, which is something that I learned from your websites by your publisher. So I have a review copy of the book, and I have contact information. So I'm going to be doing a show on that. If you guys would like to participate in that show, just let me know. You're more than welcome to.
oh yeah, would love to.
Yeah, that's the McFarlane book that came out a couple months ago about the portrayal of strongmen, right? From
From the dawn of time to today.
Oh yeah, I'd love to revisit in Cantu, since he was a strong man, and had incredible strength when he was alive, and of course, you know, in his undead state, he continued to have that.
And our publisher just published. That's kind of, Nick, are you a writer? No, you're not a very good sources. Anyway, our publisher just published a book that came out, I don't know, a month or 2 ago, about the influence of Grecian myths on Westerns. And I forget what that's called, but yeah, they're still cranking out some cool stuff that has overlapping of what we do, what you do, what we all talk about. So I guess that's our plug for our publisher, McFarlane. Come out
Okay,
there.
we can check that off now.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if we ought to go ahead and get started with our conversation, which
you want to talk about King Kong?
That sounds incredibly awesome. And I will share a little tidbit of trivia about me. There was a call put out for crowd scenes in the Dino De Laurentiis, I believe, King Kong movie, where instead of climbing the Empire State Building, I believe he climbed the Twin Towers or something like that. So lots of people showed up and we just basically walked back and forth and looked alarmed, and it, it was a lot of fun. And of course, I don't believe I can be located in the crowd. I did try, but it was a fun thing to do. And you know, by your choice of topic, it came back to memory. I'd forgotten all about it until you guys suggested today's topic.
Before we go into King Kong, I don't know if we've told you this story or shared it on the show, but you know, being an extra is really fun. And when we lived in SoCal, both Michelle and I, we got a couple opportunities to be extras. There was a Netflix show called Best Worst Weekend Ever that we got to be extras on. We were manning it took place at a Comic-Con, basically, not San Diego Comic-Con, but like it. And I guess we haven't watched the series except for the one episode that we're extras in. And of course, we're like frame by frame, do we see us? Do we see us? Do we see us? But it was cool, you know, to be on a big production, even as an extra, everyone kind of milling back and forth and pretending to talk and
a lot of peas and carrots.
A lot of peas and carrots, peas and carrots. And of course, the cool thing was we took a day off work that day. So we took vacation pay to go do one day of shooting. And I think we made more being an extra in that day of work. And
I think we did
12 hours of being on set, just crammed behind a booth. But, you know, we got to have buffet dinner and see all the magic and stuff. So, yeah. So I'm imagining a King Kong movie to be an extra and would be super cool. But yeah, we were totally doing the same thing, frame by frame. We see the general area we were in. I think that blurry bit might be your back picture.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
All right, so King Kong time.
Yeah, so
original 1933 one is one we're focusing on.
That's right. And kind of the reason for us focusing, because we're going to do another little shameless plug, is that Nick and I will be panelists next week.
Yeah,
on Labor Day weekend. Here in Phoenix, they have a sci-fi fantasy convention called CocoCon. So one of the panels that we'll be on, we'll be talking about films from the pre-code era, so prior to 1934. And for people that might not be familiar with what this code is,
Hays Code.
The Hays Code, originally Hollywood put out kind of like a suggested code of not having particular content, not having profanity, overt sexuality, misogyny, nudity, and a number of things. Well, filmmakers continue to make films and it kind of built on the sensationalism, and Hollywood continued to have some problems with the content.
Hays Code, we'll take that under advisement.
So the Hays Code came into being. There was guidance up until about 1934, and then the Hays Code came in, and that really put a kibosh on a lot of kind of questionable content.
Well, relative questionable, you know.
Yes.
It was a lot of moralistic stuff. So a lot of, you know, what we would see as progressive, transgressive, avant-garde stuff just got swept under the rug, and here's more populist, family-friendly, American value-friendly cinema. Well,
and I think that what it did is it caused filmmakers to find other ways to kind of, you know, get around those codes,
which we've talked about before in Italy during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where, well, hey, you know, we could get away with showing blood, sex, and death as long as, you know, we do X, Y, and Z that appeals to, you know, Catholic majority and Irish majority or whatever. So I guess it is sort of creative that way.
Yeah. So I thought we could start with a little bit of background on King Kong and some noteworthy items, and then I'll do a plot. And I apologize in advance, but it is slightly long.
So y'all are gonna treat, instead of my snarky plots, they're not supposed to be snarky. I just try to insert a little bit of humor into them. Y'all get a professional, concise plot from Michelle.
That's going to be about 3 minutes instead of 1 minute. So King Kong was released on March 2nd in 1933. It actually premiered in New York City, not so far from Hercules, but many years before any of us were around. And then it had a more general release in April 7th of the same year. The running time with the 4-minute overture was 104 minutes. And so the overture started out with classical music, and basically it's snippets from the film, different musical beats from different scenes. So you get kind of a, an idea that you're going to have classical music, then it kind of transcends to a more adventure sound, then to tribal, and then to very dramatic and, overwhelming kind of climactic music. So that's what the first 4 minutes are. The budget was $672,000. Now this is 1933 dollars, and the box office was 5.3 million.
Wow.
It starred Fay Wray as Ann Darrow, Robert Armstrong as Carl Denham, and Bruce Cabot as Jack Driscoll. And those are our main characters. And I just realized I didn't pull the director, so my apologies to the director.
Miriam C. Cooper, right?
Well, that was the writer.
Oh,
but
never mind.
I'm not sure if that's the director. So maybe you can take a quick peek while I continue on. So some noteworthy things about the film. It is a pre-code adventure fantasy horror monster film. It was the first King Kong film in quite a number of King Kong films. Yes, you were correct, Nick.
Half correct.
Half correct. We had another partner there, Ernest B.
Shustak
Shustak.
and Miriam C. Cooper.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Wikipedia.
Yes, thank you, Wikipedia. We'll give them credit for that one. Rotten Tomatoes ranked the film as the greatest horror film of all time and the 56th greatest film of all time.
Wow.
Library of Congress deemed it culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. It was selected by the National Film Registry for preservation. And it had groundbreaking use of special effects that include stop motion animation, matte painting, rear projection, and miniatures.
And forced perspective too, right?
Didn't mention that, but if we saw that in there, then yes. And interestingly, I didn't think about this, but it was filmed over an eight-month period, which is quite unusual because, typically films were shot very quickly and edited and put together. So that really surprised me. And then of course it's on the AFI lists on a variety of lists. So let's get into the plot. In New York Harbor, filmmaker Carl Denham, known for wildlife films in remote and exotic location, charters a ship for his new project. His insurance coverage is about to be revoked, and no agent has been able to secure an actress for the lone female role he has. With hours left before setting sail, he searches the streets of New York City for a woman to fill the role. He finds Ann Darrow, a down-on-her-luck girl who has just been caught as she steals a piece of fruit. Denham diffuses the situation and takes her to a cafe, buys her a coffee. He offers her the role, an adventure of a lifetime. When she looks at him cautiously and kind of asks, like, what do you want now? Denham assures her that his intent and interest is strictly professional. So she accepts. Handshake. So even though Anne is a woman and ships are no place for women, she ingrains herself with the crew. Hardened first mate Jack Driscoll falls in love with Anne and professes his love.
Wow.
And it is reciprocated, even better.
You're worse than me.
I'm a romantic, what can I say? So Denham, who initially is secretive about the destination, finally shares with the crew and the captain that they are headed for Skull Island, an uncharted territory which he just happens to have a map for. He also alludes to a mysterious entity named Kong, excuse me, rumored to dwell on the island. Trying to get that dramatic pacing here, gang. They soon arrive and anchor offshore and then sneak on shore, where they spy on the native village as they perform a sacred ritual at a huge gate and wall in which they prepare a young woman to become the bride of Kong. In other words, a sacrifice. Denham and party are discovered and the villagers stop their ritual process. Once they notice Anne, a pale blonde woman, they want to trade her since they see her as a unique prize for Kong. Denham refuses and his party returns to the ship. Later that same evening, the villagers sneak aboard and kidnap Anne and go back to the island where they continue the ritual to offer her up to Kong by leaving her tied to an altar situated on the other side of this huge wall. Kong is immediately smitten and carries Anne away. Denham, Jack, and a party of men give pursuit to their peril as they encounter deadly prehistoric creatures and eventually Kong. Only Denham and Jack survive. Jack follows Kong and Anne while Denham returns to the ship for more men and ammo. Eventually, while Kong is distracted with the latest monster that he must kill to protect Anne, Jack and Anne make their escape, but not without Kong on their heels. Kong runs into the village and one of Denham's gas bombs, which causes Kong to become unconscious. Yep, down he goes. Now shackled, Kong is returned to New York City, and then he's presented to an audience anticipating Denham's latest adventure film, but got more than their $20 tickets worth as they gaze at the eighth wonder of the world. Anne and Jack are in their finery and pictures are taken by the press, but the camera flashes sets off Kong, who thinks it is an attack. All flee, but Kong soon finds Anne and takes her to the city's iconic Empire State Building. Biplanes are sent to attack Kong in the climactic scene. Kong succumbs from the numerous wounds inflicted by the planes, and after taking one more moment with Anne, he falls to his death. Denham arrives and pushes through a crowd surrounding Kong's corpse in the street. When a policeman remarks that the planes got him, Denham tells him, no, it wasn't the airplanes. It was Beauty that killed the beast.
Ta-da!
There we go. How's that?
That's good. Although
you.
I wasn't expecting any snark, but you over snark me sometimes.
Well, there we go.
So this is an old school movie, very old school. And what'd you think of it?
Well, I'll tell you, watching it again after, I think the last time we watched it was when we lived in Washington. So that was well over 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah, it was, it had one of its anniversaries. It must have been, came out in 33, probably like 70th anniversary or something. They had a nice little box set that came out in a 10, and, you know, this is a 2000s, so everything had an anniversary in that decade. So here's a giant, you know, Wizard of Oz box set, Ben-Hur box set. Hey, I showed that box set off. Here's a King Kong box set, and inside of it was like Son of Kong and all these other films. And so, yeah, that it had to have been a long time ago.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever seen it. Ow. To interject real quick, I always thought, because we'll talk about pop culture and King Kong in a second, I always thought King Kong was one of those films that you think you've seen, but you really haven't seen. It's because it's been parodied so much, and you know, a lot of the scenes are, you know, shown in other clips and stuff, and it's referenced a lot, that it's just one of those movies that I just think as a general collectiveness that it's so pervasive that you think you've seen it, but until you actually sit down and watch it, I haven't seen this at all. I've only known 5% of this film, you know, the highlights obviously, but so it's always an interesting, I would say, you know, for us revisiting it again after 10, 12 years, just basically watching it for the first time again. It's still, yeah, it's King Kong.
So I would say that with this watching, knowing that we're going to be talking about it in the panel and then also for this show, I really tried to take the perspective of an audience person back in 1933 and what they would have thought about when they saw this film. And obviously it's very exciting. It's very
It doesn't
unique.
let up.
It's fast paced. It has a lot of stop motion and a lot of monsters, a lot of excitement, but it also had a lot of violence. So I had not remembered how many death scenes and
Not just death scenes, they're brutal death scenes.
they're brutal death scenes. Kong with different people in his mouth that he, you know, it looks like he's crunching down on. We don't see the blood from people, but we do see from the monsters. Like the first, I don't remember what kind of Stegosaurus.
I think it's a Stegosaurus.
That they throw a bomb at, and then they shoot point blank at. You see the blood, you know, coming out of, I think, his eye socket, and then you.
As a site, I mean, this is pre-haste code. Post-haste code, you know, someone gets shot, they go, cover the wound and fall over. This is pow, rip open jaw of T-Rex, blood come out, everything. It's way different.
Yeah, and so, you know, when I looked at that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really quite a violent film for back then, and to show gore, really, because I honestly was kind of surprised when they labeled this a horror film, but now I can see why they did.
And the end, when, you know, they're shooting Kong, blood's coming out of his chest and he falls, and I mean, if it could be sort of cartoony, you know, when someone falls down a cliff, bump, bump, bump. It's sort of cartoony, but at the same time, because the movie has been pretty realistic as a, you know, fantasy venture, it's brutal of him going splat, splat, splat. So it's basically cartoon violence that's
not really, it's not really cartoonish, you know, in context for the rest of the film. It's actually very serious. And I honestly, you know, I thought, I took a moment to think about even like 9/11 and what that must have been like, along with, you know, looking at this film. What about you?
Same boat. I remember watching the first time and enjoying it. And then I think, you know what? I think it was after we watched it the first time, it was also when the Peter Jackson one came out. Then we watched that. We were surprised at how, even though it's twice as long as the original, that it was so beat by it. Although they changed, like, you know, who you're supposed to be sympathetic with in that one. But I mean, the acting is terrible. Everyone sounds like they're on the radio. You know, the special effects don't hold up, and I don't hold it against it. It's very misogynistic, very racist. But also, I mean, that's all coming from, you know, current lens, you know, looking at it from the lens of back then. This is Jurassic Park of the Great Depression era. Because I mean, people were seeing things that they had not seen before. Just like when I was a little kid and I saw Jurassic Park on the theater. Oh my God, I've never seen a realistic CGI dinosaur. Well, here's King Kong. And also, you know, it's a fun movie despite its, you know, hindsight flaws. And, you know, again, we can't help that. We can point them out. You know, there's a whole bunch of Kong movies since then, Skull Island remakes, Kong versus Godzilla. It's still kind of a fun jungle adventure film. And also, I'd say kind of a proto-tiki film. I mean, I wouldn't call it a full tiki film, but it's still in that area. The South Seas Adventures that we would get about 10 years later when World War II came out, because you would have a lot of South Seas Adventures during the that era. So this is laying the groundwork for that. So all that stuff kind of mixes up that it's still an exciting movie, but I was, you know, rubbing eyes just like Michelle, like this is actually a pretty brutal film, not just then, but now too. And, you know, I'll be honest, I felt a little sad when they shot the Stegosaurus. It made me think
I did too.
He didn't do anything, you know, he's just being a Stegosaurus. There was a movie that came out about 20 years later called Beast of Hollow Mountain. And I believe there's a linkage between this and King Kong, either a producer or someone inspired by it. But, you know, the last fourth of that movie is a T-Rex that comes out and is eating cowboys and cattle. And I'm like, and, you know, the cowboys are lassoing it and shooting it, and it's actually kind of bloody. I'm like, I felt bad for the T-Rex. He's just being a T-Rex. He's in a strange, just like King Kong, he's in a strange world. He doesn't know what's going on. So I felt bad for the Stegosaurus.
Well, and I think you and I were talking before that the Peter Jackson film, there's definitely a sympathetic angle, you know, to associate with Kong. And I, you know, obviously in King Kong, the 33 version that we watched, there isn't, but as I'm going to say, you know, as people that love animals, I know I gravitated towards having sympathy towards the various animals, and you know, our encroachment into their habitat.
Oh yeah, this is animals and native folks. This is a total colonialist movie of you know, imperialism encroaching on, in this case, an island that doesn't belong to them, taking stuff out of it that doesn't belong to them as well. Which, you know, I know there's a lot been written about the racism element of King Kong and what that's a metaphor for, and you know, that's certainly there for sure. But yeah, you know, from animals to people, the, you know, we, in a way, King Kong is indicative, I think, of what we'd see in the 70s, especially with the Dino De Laurentiis King Kong. Is that's when the era of the animals run amok genre come out, where you know what, nature's not going to take it anymore. We're going to send swarms, locusts, gods of the earth, burnt towering infernos and Poseidon adventures after everyone, and earthquakes. We're not going to take it. And Jaws, we can't forget about Jaws either. But
well, and then we had a more recent recycle, you know, with like all the Sharknado films and all. I'm sorry, I had to bring it up.
It's just so funny how, as a side note, because King Kong does, I think, fall into this, you know, it falls into the kaiju Godzilla category, but that Godzilla is a metaphor for, I mean, the original one is atomic coming back, but it's also a metaphor for nature, Monster Island, all that stuff, nature pushing back as well. But it's just so funny that the 70s, you know, took it really seriously. I mean, even like a movie like Piranha, the Joe Dante Piranha, which is more of a black comedy horror film, but it's still dead serious. Compare it to Sharknado, you know, three-headed shark, zombie, all those films. I mean, they have the similar message, but can you really? I don't know. You know, I haven't seen many of them. I've seen a handful of them. I think they're more good to laugh at rather than to walk away and go, huh, you know, a big what if.
Yeah. And in the 70s, you know, like late 60s going into the 70s, as I recall, because I was pretty young at the time, but I know that ecology and the environment were huge issues at that time. So I'm not surprised that we would have films where, you know, nature is striking back and basically, you know, don't mess with us type of messaging.
That would make sense because, you know, 40s, we didn't have those types of movies. 50s and 60s, you know, we're getting into Vietnam. There's more other quote unquote pressing matters. Yeah, I think
that's ancient indeed. In Greek mythology, you have the Olympians against the Titans, you have the giants against the Olympians, you have Typhon against the Olympians, and all of these were instigated by the earth, who wasn't going to take it anymore. So, you know, she took action through gods and monsters, as you've pointed out. So that's been with us for a very long time.
Well, I think what is it? There's a term for this. I don't know what it is. I am that crappy of a scholar, but you have like kind of three arenas, you know, man versus machine, man versus nature, and man versus himself. And you know, these all fall under the man versus nature. And you know, it's weird. A lot of these, you know, at the end of the day, man still comes out triumphant, but you know, kind of at what cost? And are they really triumphant at the end? You know, at the end of the day of, you know, King Kong, you know, what's left for all the people? They came for a spectacle. They certainly did get a spectacle, but you know, I think the loss of so much, you know, loss of King Kong, you know, the eighth wonder of the world is now a wonder of the world no more, and stuff like that. So just, you know, sometimes when we, you know, try to man overtake nature, as you said, not gonna take it anymore.
Yeah. So kind of going back to a little bit of the censorship, I did see that when the film came out in 1933, there was some push for censoring. And so I guess, you know, some of the scenes we brought up, the Brontosaurus, we haven't brought up about Anne yet, so we'll have to talk about that here in a minute. But, you know, Kong biting people, you know, mistaking a woman for Anne, so he just drops her to her death.
And he steps on people, which he
Yes.
pushes them in the ground, which again, out of context sounds cartoony. We've seen that many times in Bugs Bunny cartoons where, you know, an anvil falls down and splats them in the ground, and, you know, there's the impression in they're pancaked. But here it is, for all purposes, in real life. These are, you know, folks getting stomped on, and, you know,
And not just
pancaked.
stomped on, but
squished.
But Khan takes on kind of an anamorphic characteristics where he's actually, like you said, smushing. You see his foot, he's actually smushing people into the ground, just pulverizing them, which is a very kind of more humanistic, you know, why would he know that kind of move?
Well, we were also talking about, like, as Kong is taking off with Anne, you know, and not soldiers, the ship people are in pursuit, that the dinosaurs strike back. But, you know, there's the scene of the Brontosaurus, they're in the lake, the Brontosaurus comes up, tips over the raft, and, you know, it starts, like, it doesn't eat people, it scoops them up, bites them, and tosses them and pursues. And we're like, that's interesting behavior, because if he was hungry, if the Brontosaurus was hungry, it would sit back, it's got its floating bodies to eat. No, it's actually pursuing people to kill them. So it's you know, why would it do that? You know, it's for sport. Is it that, you know, it's a more human type thing to do rather than an animalistic thing to do.
Yeah, and I think another film that came out around this time was The Most Dangerous Game, and we all know the kind of premise about that, which is, you know, you have a big hunter and he's out there for sport, and so the thing that he hasn't hunted yet has been man. And I really get the sense that they kind of use some of that idea with these monsters, because the one dinosaur plucks the guy from the tree, and that is the only one where it looks like he actually mauls and eats. The rest of them are, you know, tossed in the air, and, you know, it's like he's trying to get to as many as he can, like it's a race against time.
No, we know as spectators, this is all part of the jungle adventure. The Brontosaurus and the dinosaurs are a threat. They're going to chase you down and you got to escape them. But, you know, put into more of a conscientious context, you know, that's not the way animals behave. You know, like we'd seen in the 70s, animals run amok, fighting back. Kong squishing people on the ground. You didn't have to do that. You could just throw them out and kept pursuing and whatnot. So
yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah.
There are instances in the natural world where animals actually do behave like that. And like the Brontosaurus, they're herbivores.
Yeah.
They'll do like extreme violence by stomping or goring, you know, people who threaten them. And they'll do it in such an extreme way to discourage anybody from trying that, you know, again. So sometimes if animals are pushed and they can't take it anymore, as you guys have said, they will lash out in very surprising and gleefully murderous ways.
But yeah, they're still pushing back. That Brontosaurus scene, I still think he's doing it for sport.
Yeah, I think you could be right. We were rewatching the film before the show tonight, and Nick, you made a good observation. I know you're like, who, me? And that is Kong having to go through all these trials and tribulations once he gets Anne.
Yeah, I mean,
it was an interesting
he's
observation.
King Kong. He's king. King is in his name. That's his island. When you look at the island, you know, only this much is fenced off. You know, it's
on screen.
Yeah,
A little bit,
everything else is Kong's domain. That's his domain. He is king. He's, you know, in charge of it. But it's so weird how antagonistic his own island is against him, from you know, the T-Rex to the pterodactyl to, you know, some other things. It's like, does he wake up every day and he's just going out, get his newspaper, fight, and come back? I'm like, no, I mean, he's King Kong. This is his territory. You know, I would assume over time, you know, animals establish their territories. You know, you don't go here, you don't go here, you don't go here. This is my area. This is where my food is. And I would assume that's the same for, I'm trying to be a biologist or something for Skull Island, but you get what I'm saying? It's like, why? I get it as a moviegoer. You know, this is exciting when the bad things aren't happening to the sailors, bad things are happening to King Kong. But, you know, I'm also thinking that should have been a pretty smooth ride for King Kong to pluck up his girl and go to his even in the cave, there's something waiting for him. I'm like, that's his cave. Come on. So it's just kind of interesting where, you know, the spectacle kind of overrides of I don't know, common sense, I guess.
Well, and I almost wonder if without Anne there, whether there would be the same antagonism that there seems to be when he has Anne, because he had, you know, like he puts her down, he's going after the men, he's trying to get Jack, and then he hears her scream, so he like runs back to her, and then he has another fight because now she's threatened.
I would get it if the other monsters wanted her for themselves. This T-Rex is like, wait a second, where'd you get that girl? I want that girl. That's mine. No, that's mine.
Well, and the pterodactyl, I think it's the only one that actually makes sense, because he actually, you know, gets her in his talons and he's going to go fly off, and you know, of course, Kong is there. I think we still have a little bit of time, and I think we need to talk about, what are you pointing out?
I gotta insert it. Always gotta do. Anytime we talk about sacrifice, gotta bring up Rene Girard's Violence in the Sacred, because in this movie, you know, Fay Wray is the sacrifice. I mean, the bride, but let's be honest, you know, the intent is for her to be eaten. And, you know, when you appease the gods, you've let out the violence in your system. So in classical sense, if Fay Wray had just gotten eaten by Kong, the people didn't go and pursue her, you know, there would have been all this whole ordeal. So, you know, Rene Girard strikes again. That's all I got.
Okay. All righty. Well, there seems to be a bit of Kong being smitten by Anne, and her unique look versus the other sacrifices that have come his way over the years. And the relationship and what Kong displays towards her is very questionable. You know, to the point at where he takes a very unique interest in her clothes. He starts peeling her clothes off, which is very creepy. And then at one point, he like touches, or he's tickling her hair, and then he sniffs his hand, and it's pretty sexual.
Yeah.
And
of course it's, I don't know how to say it, it's definitely not reciprocated. But I'm thinking back to the Peter Jackson one, where the Naomi Watts version, you know, I don't think King Kong is creepy toward her, and there's more of a sympathy back toward him rather than a outright fear or something. I gotta dust the cobwebs off the Peter Jackson one, because I just remember that it's probably because, again, made in the 2000s,
a different ideology is at work. And I feel like with the Peter Jackson, and again, I'm kind of dusting off the cobwebs too, but I felt that there was almost, while there is obviously a spark for Kong with the Anne character, there's also, I'm going to say, a little bit of a respect between the two, where obviously we don't have that in 1933. And even earlier in the opening scenes of the film, you know, they're talking about women, and you know, they're talking to Denham and asking, well, why would you take a woman on this? You know, there's so much, you know, yes, it's adventurous, but it's a lot of danger. And, you know, he kind of retorts that, well, it's dangerous for women in New York City. And one of the other sailors was like, yes, and we all know about that danger, you know, referring kind of to them. And, you know, it's just kind of an interesting and play. And you know, you can definitely see this pre-code and why
allusions to prostitution and whatnot.
Yeah, in fact, there's even a scene in there where Denham, when he's looking for someone, he oh, that's you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
You know, he goes to a line of women, and they're all waiting to get food and have shelter for the
Out
night.
of context, that's Jack the Ripper creepy.
Yes, and he like stop and he's looking at each one, and they're having their conversations about what the food is and whether they're going to have a place to stay tonight. And yeah, he's like stalking them out and trying to figure out, does he have his actress amongst that line? And so yeah, there's definitely some not PC stuff going on. But again, considering the time, it's good to talk about these things and point them out and understand them.
It's also an interesting fantasy take, because as we're also talking about, it plays into, you know, that idea of, you know, the waitress working at the cafe and the producer is going to come in. Oh, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Let me swoop you off your feet, take you to Hollywood, and make you a star, baby. You know, and that's what happens literally in this movie. He goes and finds, for all purposes, a transient woman and says, "You're pretty cute. I'm going to put you in my movie." And, you know, it does seem kind of outlandish, creepy, but, you know, that was the actress dream for, you know, 30s through 60s at least, especially when you had Route 66 and all those roadways between Hollywood and Vegas and other parts of the world where people would drive and stop off at these cafes. And, you know, has that ever actually really happened in real life? I'm going to take, well,
Yes, it happened. Remember the show Angel
no.
with Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Oh,
David Boreanaz was walking his dog when somebody associated with the show discovered him and said that you're going to be a vampire in our show. So that's
There we
really
go.
interesting where that actually did happen.
Well, very cool. So it does happen. I was actually, as we were talking, I was thinking of Victor Victoria, that starred Julie Andrews, where she, you know, is really down on her luck, and she ends up cross-dressing as a way to try to get ahead. And so, you know, there's lots, I think Cabaret even with Michael York and was it Liza Minnelli?
yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of that kind of portrayal that, you know, women are trying to do what they can.
Girl in the Gold Boots.
Yeah.
That's a terrible exploitation film, but that's the plot in that one. You know, working at the diner and gets plucked up to be in a what is it, a creepy go-go show or something.
Well, I know we have a few minutes left, so do you recall any of the other Kong films that you wanted to bring up?
Well, so Kong is, you know, the big first, I'd say, big first monster movie, Jurassic Park of the era. You know, it spawned all these King Kong films that would fall in its wake. And it's, you know, it's kind of amazing how King Kong, despite, you know, there's problematic stuff in it, especially when looking at it with modern day eyes, that it still holds up versus something like Tarzan, where I think, you know, they're both, you know, jungle fair movies that have some, you know, questionable aspects to them. But, you know, Tarzan, I think, has lost favor over the years because it's been kind of more cartoonified. It's more of a, I even think the last couple Tarzan films that came out were all panned and everything. While King Kong seems to elude that. The King Kong movies more or less still become pretty successful. The Dino De Laurentiis one was successful. The Peter Jackson one was, it's pretty long, but it still made a lot of money. Kong
Wasn't it,
Skull Island coming back with the Godzilla stuff. People really liked that when we saw Kong Skull Island, and we remember it was brutal for different reasons. You know, Chico and Vietnam War, people
Mhm.
kind of mindlessly, you know, trying to self-sacrifice themselves, but they get swatted and blown up anyway. But it's just kind of interesting how the king, he is the king. He still manages to pervade pop culture and maybe I'm going to say remain relevant. And despite, you know, the stigma that could be associated with him, he's able to fend it off and become, you know, a heroic, like in the new films, you know, Guardian of Earth, I think in the Godzilla films or something like that. So I think it's kind of interesting how, you know, it follows the trajectory of Godzilla, where, you know, the first movie Godzilla, he's the antagonist, but after that, he's the hero. Despite him crushing everyone under his feet in Tokyo and stuff, he's still the good guy. You know, he's still fighting for Earth and against the other bad monsters and stuff. So it's just neat how the Americanified version of that King Kong manages to follow that trajectory as well.
Well, and we had crossover with King Kong and Godzilla. I think we had a versus film in there somewhere.
There's two of them.
There's two of them.
There's the one in the 60s or 70s that was an actual Godzilla kaiju film.
Mhm.
And then the one that's in the new monster universe with, you know, the current iteration of Godzilla.
Now, did that occur after the Skull Island one that we saw? Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I remembered the Skull Island film, Peter Jackson's. No, that was not Peter Jackson's, the one with
It gets confusing. Yeah,
Tom Hiddleston.
yeah, the Tom Hiddleston.
That was setting up to do King Kong and
right,
a Godzilla.
right.
Okay.
And we didn't see the King Kong versus Godzilla one that time, but we saw clips of it where they journey to the center of the earth and other things. And I remember it being, this is you know, they Marvelified it. They MCU'd it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I think overall, revisiting King Kong, I think it still impresses. You know, it looks good for its time. It still looks pretty good today. I mean, is it, you know, realistic? You know, yeah, it's pretty obvious it's a stop motion, but you know, it's the same reason you watch Harryhausen films. They still look good. The craftsmanship looks good. They're integrated in the movie pretty well. There's a technical acumen of King Kong that I think still holds up, and it is an exciting film. It pretty much right when they arrive at Skull Island to the end, it's pretty nonstop. It's fight after fight after fight after fight, and so it's a pretty fast, engaging movie.
And I think that makes it very modern. And that was one of the things that I noticed as we're getting ready to wrap up, is the fact that how modernity is even portrayed in this film. And, you know, we get a look at, you know, comparison between the more, I don't want to say uncivilized, but the more things where it's still exotic and it's wild and it's unexplored versus modern life, and you know, the tall buildings, your cars, your airplanes that are starting to come into existence and will eventually be more commercial.
The literal jungle versus the concrete jungle.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's
Wow,
for us.
that's very comprehensive, and thank you so very much. I enjoyed listening to all your research, and you shared it in a very entertaining way. So thank you. I had a couple of pieces of information to share before we wrap up. One is that our audience in Sword and Sandal Cinema is growing. All told, just in that piece of it, you know, in that small piece of the groups, there's nearly 30,000 individuals who are into Sword and Sandal cinema. So I'm trying to do something different with the podcast. I want to add a third Sword and Sandal Cinema podcast. That one will be on rotation, and that'll give you guys more freedom to do anything you want with your current show, The Scholars from the Edge of Time, because we'll be covering like Sword and Sandal, including Egyptian Sword and Sandal and off-world Sword and Sandal on the Sword and Sandal shows. and figure you'd be on like once every 2 or 3 months. So it wouldn't really be an imposition on your time. If you're interested, just let me know and I'll start putting that together.
I think once we start really diving into our cat essays, Cat Mummy and Cat and Peplum films, we'll definitely have a revisitation of old school Sword and Sandal that we'll have to come back and say, we just revisited this, we gotta watch it.
Yeah, definitely. I know that we would be interested in sharing that scholarship that we're working on.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so we will do it. Before we wrap up for today, how can people enter the wonderful worlds that you brought us?
Okay, I will go first.
Ladies first.
Ladies first, I guess. So I have a website. It's michellebrittany.com. I have a author page on Amazon that you can go and see all the essays and books that I'm a part of. We also do a podcast called the HP Lovecast. So you can look at any streaming service that you use. You can look us up, and we have lots of episodes in which we talk about the derivative and kind of study derivative literature of HP Lovecraft, and more horror studies in general. So we run the gamut as far as our mediums. We look at literature, films, comics. I don't know what else we do. Video games. We're working on a video game discussion.
Oh, awesome.
Gosh, yeah.
This site
Just real quick, and we'll bring it up again another time.
Yeah, I'm playing a game right now called Call of the Sea, and it takes place in the 30s, and you're a lady who has a disease that can your husband or your old chum,
yes, they call her
goes to a mysterious island off of Tahiti, and you go chasing after him. So it's basically ties into King Kong, 1930s. Instead of a damsel like Fay Ray, you are the courageous woman trying to unearth this mystery. So just started playing it. It has Cthulhu elements and stuff in it. So King Kong.
You know what? We might talk about that next month or something. So we'll have to figure that out.
And then I'm at nickdiak.com, nickdiak.com. From there, it links to all my social media and news. I try to update it maybe every other week with a new essay or something. And also have an index of all the podcasts that we're on, including all of the Scholars on the Edge of Time and Voice of Olympus appearances. So folks that want to look at archives and revisit.
He's my archivist for all of our appearances.
And well, we're always happy to be on your show, Hercules. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes.
And thank you so very much for being here. I will share one quick tale before we say bye. My first exposure to Lovecraft wasn't a very pleasant one. I was into Robert E. Howard, and somebody told me that Robert E. Howard and Lovecraft corresponded with each other, and Lovecraft inspired modern horror, and I was into horror, so I figured I'd give it a try. So I got one of the paperbacks that had the Lovecraft's Earth in it, and the first story I read, the scary part at the end was in the basement, and his elbow was revealed. Some eldritch thing's elbow. That was where it ended. So I took a pass on Lovecraft for somebody else convinced me to read Lovecraft. And the second time around, the story really hooked me in, and I'm a big fan of his Dreamlands, especially.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, we love the Dreamlands probably the most, but no, you're right. We read the I think it was the Tomb. I don't remember what it's called, but it had a Houdini in it, and like
under the pyramid.
Under the pyramids, and that's how it ends. Like Houdini, like sees like the toe of a big eldritch god or something, and that's enough to scare him or something. Like it's his. I mean, come on. I understand these cosmic beings are unfathomable, but it's a toe. Come on. So yeah, Lovecraft characters, we call it the Lovecraft faint, because they'll see something so horrible.
And that's the guys
That's the
reacting
guys.
that way. So.
Well, thanks again. Have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to our next conversation.
We'll see you next month, and we'll see everyone else next month.
Thank you, Hercules.
Thank you. And thanks to everybody who tuned in tonight. This should be up by tomorrow, which is Friday at the 26th, I believe. Have a wonderful evening.